Hi there. So today we have moved into my studio. I am attempting to clean this and yeah, it's not going so well, but I hope you've all had a wonderful weekend and that you stayed creative. I still stayed creative besides trying to clean up in here and organize my online workshops. I also have a store, so I've been working hard at the store trying to get it all fresh so that when we can reopen, the place looks all stunning and beautiful instead of pulled apart the way I had it going before. So I'm not sure if I'm posting in the chat. Can anybody let me know? I thought I was, but I wasn't 100% sure if this is within the chat or if this is public. So I may have to adjust that later. But anyway, for now, if I'm in the chat, then or in our group, then that's exactly where I want it to be. And if it's in the public, then sorry everybody. I did say that as of today we'd be only in within our group. So again, it's not public. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention is now that we're not public anymore, I'm going to leave it up to you guys, but I would love it if you would tell your friends about it. Tell your friends about, or anybody that you think might enjoy doing this. Our tribe needs to grow, obviously, in order to keep the energy flowing and all that, because as people start to go back to work and stuff like that, our group's going to change. It's only during isolation that I think that we have so many people at home. And so yeah, so please tell your friends about it. Tell anybody that you think might enjoy being part of this tribe. I'd love to see it grow because I've seen so many of you who really do thrive and are enjoying having community. And I think it's really important. I've always thought it's really important to have community, and that's one of the reasons that Open Studio has always appealed to me, is because I do believe that it's necessary. I'm going to move this down a little bit. Pardon me for a sec. I'm going to try and get a better angle of the painting. So what I thought I would do today is not rescue an old painting, but just continue working on old paintings. So this comes up a lot. A lot of people are always asking me about this. There, that's much better. So a lot of people are always asking me about paintings. Thank you, Sophie. That's perfect. So, yeah, so what do you do with a painting that has either been abandoned or you've just let it go for some time and then you come back to it? A lot of time, I read this all the time, or I hear students talk about it. They always say that they need to get out the gesso and paint over it. And I just question why you would do that. My philosophy is not about covering something up. It's about going back in and working with what you have and maybe letting some things go, but also being open to the fact that you've already got lots of texture, you've already got lots of layers, you've got some good stuff going on in that painting. It just may not be everything, may not be working for you. So I'm going to take this painting, sorry I can't get my apron on. I'm going to take this painting that I have started a while ago, and I can tell you the reason I think I abandoned it or that I stopped working on it was because, I'll get you a better look. So I think the reason I stopped working on it was because the image itself is blurry, it's very gray, and the whole thing just felt bleh to me. And I had added these black papers. Whoops, I'll get away so that I can talk about it better. I had added these black papers, and I had thought that that might help deepen this image, but at the end, it's a really big image, and so I'm going to, before abandoning this painting altogether, I'm going to try to work with what I've already got. So that is going to be our theme for this week. We'll be working with what you've got, and I'm going to step in the frame for a sec. Working with what you've got and rescuing older paintings, and keep on working with things. All right, so I'll talk about it. If you have questions, if I don't get to them today, I'll answer and that sort of thing. But I'm sure you all have lots of paintings or boards or something that you started and then you think, oh, this is just a mess, and then you're going to paint over it one day. So I like to look at paintings as in progress rather than it needs to be started over. If you have something down, then yeah, you're already that much further ahead than so many people who just have a blank panel or a blank canvas. So working with what you've got to keep working is really important. So I'm going to attempt to balance and fix or continue this painting, right? So it's already got a lot of texture, and a lot of the texture came from just lots of layers of collage. So there's tons and tons of collage on here, but this painting was done a long time ago, or started a long time ago, and I just never really got back to it. So what I did before you guys tuned in today was I took a ruler and I started to add some lines. I wanted to see if I could start to put in a bit of a structure, and it turns out that when I started to put in my lines, I realized that a lot of my images that I had put on here previously were glued on crooked. So I'm going to deal with that, but at the same time I want to start putting in a structure. So structure to me in a painting is super, super important. And what do I mean by a structure? I mean that right now the painting seems to be, how do I put it? It seems to be like it's all in patches, right? So I just added this colorful thing this morning because I just had all these squares and these blocks, and I had lots of square going on and lots of rectangle and lots of hard lines. And to me, the whole thing just didn't seem like it could ever evolve into something that would be pretty, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to balance out this grainy, blurry photo, maybe even put some color into it, give it a bit of life, and then I'm going to start with a bit of the composition, because right now, like I said, I'm not liking the composition of all these rectangles everywhere. So I'm going to try and soften that a little bit, and I'm going to bring out some color. So I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm just... Next step is a GoPro. Then you guys could watch everything. So I'm just going to dispense a bit of yellow paint, and then I'm going to use some unbleached titanium. And that maybe will make a soft yellow, because I think that might help the warmth and it might complement the gray. I am also going to make a deeper gray. So I have a gray here, but I'm going to add some black to it and make a deeper gray, because I'm going to want to balance out that gray at some point. I'm quite sure of it. So I'll make that on my palette as well. And then of course that color that I always talk about that I keep on my palette, because it's just one that I absolutely love. So Liquitex just happens to be the brand that I have here, but it's called Bronze Yellow. And it is the baby poop color that I like so much. So I'm going to mix that in with my Titan Buff and my Naples Yellow, and see what kind of a yellow I come up with. But I think it's going to be, oh, it's nice. It's almost like a sepia kind of color. So I'm thinking that that might be a good color. I don't know where to put it, but you get the idea. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to put some in here. So this might help warm this up. So I'm using some of my lines that I've already created, but I'm finding that the white and the gray is just too messy. It's a bit too dirty for what I've created. So first off, let's just lay down some color. I like this piece of composition, or this piece of collage, sorry. So I'm going to keep that in not a perfect way, but it's there. I hope y'all are listening to music, because I tell you, if I didn't have to speak right now, I'd be jamming out to something. Okay, so that's looking good, and now I'm feeling like I could actually bring that into a background of some sort. And you know, all this is just about layering. It's not about, oh, see, look at how great that is, getting rid of that dark area. It's not about abandoning old works. So, like I said, I do believe that every layer in a piece of art counts, in that it just becomes part of your composition and it becomes part of your texture. So I don't believe in starting over. I don't believe in taking gesso and starting the painting over. I believe in editing. So in editing, I'm just going back and I'm responding to some of the things that were there before. And maybe okay, so I'm thinking here that if I just bring some warmth to it, then I can always go back in and I can bring the white on top, and it just, if that bit of warmth peeks through, then it may be just what I need. So I can go back in with the white and it's going to look warmer and it's going to look cleaner. I know there's a long way from understanding that process right now, but there is method to my madness here. There. So already that yellow sepia color is, like I said, in contrast to that image, which is a bit blurry and very grayed out. It doesn't have high contrast. That's not a very clean line, but that's okay. In order to bring this out, I need to warm it up. I'm feeling that's my first sort of necessary thing to do to clean up the composition of this painting. So yeah, the warmth is working. I like that a lot. And then we've got, remember I told you I messed up on this image, so I think I'm going to bring in some gray now. And when I glue things down, I don't always, or I don't ever really, think ahead too far. And I should have in this case, because I would not have glued all my images on so randomly and so crooked. It's not helping the composition at all. So I'm going to bring in some dark banding here. So I read in the comments that some of you are just getting accustomed to baby wipes. And as I've mentioned before, the baby wipes can be, and water can be quite corrosive to our paintings. So if some of you have over baby wiped, you'll notice that you have obliterated your images. But in contrast to that, I'm going to come to baby wipes defense here. The good thing about having the baby wipes do that is that if you've got work underneath that, like I just said, if you're trying to rescue or to continue working on an old painting without having the tendency to gesso over it or paint over it, or it's like do the walk of shame because you're afraid that, you know, this painting is just too ugly to be seen in the world. I would just caution you about doing that, first of all, but by covering it up instead with some paint and then baby wiping back, you have those layers underneath which maybe might look ugly, But when they peek through with the baby wipes, then you actually have something in the background that's not as plain as just a raw canvas or a board. So this week's theme, as I mentioned, is all about continuing to work on an old painting, one that maybe has been considered abandoned for whatever reason. And we are going to attempt to make those paintings the best paintings ever. And I have had much experience with this, in the idea that I continue to work on paintings, and sometimes a painting that has been long abandoned, and the reason it's been long abandoned is because something just wasn't working or whatever, and then I just think, oh, this is terrible, I'll put it aside. It's some of those paintings that I've gone back to, and they just come together so effortlessly that I wonder why I couldn't have done that in the first place. Like, it seems like the struggle was so real and so long with that painting, and then all of a sudden it wasn't. I don't know, it's just I wasn't in the right space to fix it, or the right space to keep working on it. So, so this is good because I'm getting some composition down and it's feeling much better. It feels to me like it's got a ways to go, but there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable in your art, meaning that a lot of times we paint over something, or we get rid of something for fear that people might see us, right? They might see the ugly stage or the ugly painting that we created. I'm perfectly happy with you all seeing how ugly my paintings can be, because I feel that they're just in process. Like, they're just absolutely in process, and every single painting that we do will have some ugly components to it. So you are not alone in that. I'm sorry if I keep bouncing out of screen. I'll keep talking loud enough so that you can hear me. So if you guys are being honest, if you go through your piles of paintings, for those of you who've been painting a long time or taking workshops or whatever, how many things are we just abandoned, or have we abandoned? And how many things do you almost dread going back to? Like, sometimes you look at them and we don't really approach an abandoned painting with the same enthusiasm as we do a new canvas with a prospect of a new idea coming to light. So I know when I'm taking a course and I go into the class and I've got my fresh canvas or my fresh board and I'm all excited to learn something, and it's like the world is full of possibilities, and then all of a sudden you go home and you're looking at your piles of unfinished stuff and it feels almost daunting. You don't want to go to those paintings. But to me, I can tell you that some of those paintings are the most rewarding in finishing. They're the most rewarding in finishing because they seem to come together much, much more quickly than, oh, I need some more gray. Pardon me for one sec. Anyway, they come together much more quickly because we've already got something started. It's almost like the energy just kind of like, you know, and that's what Open Studio is all about, right? So Open Studio is all about being in the same space energy with other people who have been there, done that too, and they're looking to raise their vibration so that we can find common ground. And I know, for those of you who've been painting a long time, you've got a lot of canvases and you've got a lot of boards and things like that that you think, oh, I wish I could just paint over that thing. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to just paint over everything. You can completely just give it a new, not even a new look, because you're just expanding, you're just finishing it. You just left it behind when it was feeling ugly or when it wasn't feeling finished. So those are the ones that I want you to take out this week. Take out one paint. Oh, that's a great idea. Sorry, I'm just having my ideas as I'm thinking here. What you guys should do is you should post, when you're done, you should post a before and an after picture. And we'll see how much. I've actually taken a picture of this before. So that's great. I'll do the same thing. So when I get to the point where I can post this picture, meaning I'm done, there are parts that we might be able to recognize and there are parts that we might not be able to recognize. And I want you guys to do the same thing. So take a picture right now or later on or whenever and post that of your before picture. And then work on it. And don't just gesso over it, because we want to see how much of the old peeks through and shows up in the new. I'm really curious to see how you guys will handle this, will treat this project, because this to me is one of the most rewarding types of painting for me anyway, is when I pull out something that's been long ignored and forgotten and I turn it into something that I think, wow, it was just waiting for me to wake up and finish that painting. So even if you've just started something, or maybe you finished something, maybe you're taking something off your walls. I actually just had before this lockdown, I had a student who was part of my mentoring group, and we did private sessions together. And one of the things that she did was she brought a painting that has been hanging in her house for years and years and years. And she decided that it was time to actually love that painting. So how powerful is that? Is that she'd been staring at this painting in her own house that was hanging on her walls. It was painted by her, by the way, but years ago. And then she knew that over the years that she had gotten better. Her skill set had increased. She knew that she could do more with that painting. And so in that moment, she decided that she was going to bring that painting in. And we looked at it for a long time before actually even deciding what was next. And what we had to do with that painting, or what the two of us decided had to be done with that painting, is that she had to isolate what she didn't like about it. So it's so true for all of us, right? Like if we can't identify what's wrong or what's bugging us or what like what doesn't sit right with us within that painting, then how can we possibly even begin to change it? So when we looked at it, she told me all the things that she didn't like about it, but she also pointed out all the things she did like about it. So within that, I did talk to her that we have to be willing, when we say we don't like something and we want to change it, we have to be willing to let other things go. So I'm going to put this in a different context. Recently I was having a conversation with someone about weight loss, and they were saying, oh, you just can't, it'd be so nice if you could just spot reduce. So I know myself, when I get thinner, I lose all my weight in my face and I look really gaunt. And it seems to me like if I could be thinner where I want to be thinner and still keep plump cheeks, then I wouldn't feel like it was such a hassle. So within the context of our own art, and within the context of, I need a bit of black up here, it's driving me crazy, and within the context of art and painting, or art and whatever it is, we can't spot reduce. We can't fix things in chunks and in areas and that sort of thing. I missed one area down here. Okay. So in that case, what I'm getting at here, the long, sort of convoluted way of getting there, is that we have to consider everything when we're working on our paintings and we're working to fix our paintings. We have to consider what we like about them and what we don't like about them, but we also have to be willing to sacrifice some things. So if you're going to change something, then something may have to go, and that's okay too. So I had some interesting collage under here, but now the composition is feeling busy, but you know what? It's feeling way better to me than it did before. So I'm going to spray some water. I definitely need to go and fill up this water bottle. But it's because the painting is so large, and I could sit here and baby wipe forever. But if I want to do it a little more efficiently, I'll just spray it with a little bit of water. So I'm also getting some pretty interesting little splatters. So I'm going to go get some more water for this water bottle. Yeah, I'll be right back. I'm back. Okay, so there we go. I've been kind of stingy with the water because every time we use the taps around here, because this is a shared studio space, we have this agreement that if you use the taps, you have to sterilize everything afterwards. So I try to avoid going to the water tap as often as possible because yeah, got a lot of cleaning to do afterwards. So now when I get back in with the baby wipes, now the paper becomes a bit more fragile, which is actually good because I like tears and all that stuff. It actually, to me, it really lends itself well. I'm going to bring the camera in closer so you guys can see some of this. There we go. So you see, when I remove some of this, we're getting some interesting things that are happening underneath because I had paper underneath. I don't know if you can see any of that, but like the dots from that paper are poking through, and I'm also getting a lot of smearing, so I'm going to put this back. I'm getting a lot of smearing, which just means that it's just really wet, but all that means is more baby wipes. Sorry guys. Just means more baby wipes. So I'll just have a whole pile on hand and just keep throwing them out, because the dirtier they are, the more you just smear, and that's not attractive at all. All right, this gets me excited because I see potential in that, and I'm sure that that's not as exciting to you guys right now viewing this, but let me tell you the story of this one painting I did in a class with these girls. So I had a class one time it just happened to be all women in this class, but I'll never forget this one girl in particular because she had a real I don't know, I felt bad for her because she took everything very personally, and you could tell that she was embarrassed that her painting wasn't looking good. And what we were doing is, it was a class called, I think it was it had something to do with paint by numbers. And it was a technique that I developed and taught myself when I didn't know how to paint something. So if I wanted to, let's say, insert a person into a painting and I didn't know how to paint a person, then I would print off or I would cut out from a magazine or something the person that I wanted to put in the painting. And then what I did was I would use some Liquitex clear gesso, and I would gesso over it so it would give it a nice toothy surface and it would protect the image. And then I would mix my colors and then just paint over the image to teach myself how to paint that image. So where there was a shadow, there was a shadow. Where there was a highlight, I put a highlight. So I actually used the image to teach myself how to paint that I wanted in that painting. And so anyway, I hosted a whole class on it, and it was super fun because everybody chose something, you know, that wasn't as personal or something as, I don't know. Anyway, she chose this picture of an antique doll. And antique dolls, as you know, can be a little creepy looking anyway. And what was really interesting was that her doll was looking creepier and creepier by the second. And she got so frustrated because everybody was laughing and all, but everybody was just kidding, but she took it very personally. So I could see she was getting upset. And so I just said to her, I said, you know what, if you're entirely unhappy with it, I said, why don't we try something radical? And she's like, what? So we went over to the sink, and I said to her, I said, do you trust me on this one? She's like, I don't know. And I said, let's just try something. So we covered the entire painting in black gesso or black chalk paint, one or the other, I can't remember. We let it dry for a minute or two, and then we ran the whole painting under under the tap. And it washed it all off, but it did this kind of drippy, sort of see-through staining technique. And honest to God, it was so beautiful. The painting didn't look creepy anymore. It looked like an original oil painting, first of all, but it looked so beautiful. And all the effort she had put in of doing all that, you know, face painting and all that stuff, which looked really tacky, but underneath all that black, it looked amazing. And anyway, long story short, oh, sorry, it's already too late for that. But I'll try to wrap this up. She actually submitted that painting for a competition, and she won first place. So it was really impressive, and both she and I were absolutely super impressed with it. But it just seemed to me like the painting needed to be just toned down a little bit. It just couldn't be as scary as it was looking, and then as childish. But this little technique of toning and painting and baby wiping and washing paint off, it can actually create some really, really beautiful effects. So if some of you are stuck with where to start with your painting, why not start there? So take an old painting that you think this is just absolutely ridiculous, paint it all in one color, and then let it dry for a few moments. You don't like this. You don't want it to be sopping wet paint because you're just going to wash it all off. And at the same time, you don't want it to have been sitting there for days either, because that'll be too dry and cured. And then take it over to a tap at a laundry sink or something like that, and just wash it off and see what happens. Let it run, let it stain, let it do its thing. And then for those of you who don't have access to a sink where you can do that, it's my experience that hubbies don't like it too much when you use your white porcelain sinks at home to clean paint out. So just use a bunch of baby wipes or lots of paper towel and water, and just start to stain it and see what comes through. Like this yellow that I had placed on in just to warm it up, it's doing such a nice job of toning and warming this painting. that I don't even know if I'm going to have to paint out my image. So initially I thought I was going to paint my image, but it's still a long way from being done. But I'm much happier with the tone and the composition. So that was my goal for today, right? Was to adjust the composition of this painting so that it didn't look as dark and as boxed in as it was. So there, that's a great challenge for this week. So post a before, even post some durings, because you're going to have a good laugh every once in a while when you do something that you think might be fixing it. But I promise you that the more you keep working on something, the better it looks. Because I actually, you guys have heard me say this now probably 100 times, but I actually believe that that's how texture is built into our paintings, right? It's just by layer and layer and layer and layer. So I would challenge you to pull out a painting, and I know some of you who are watching today, you've all got these, right? So you've all got at least one painting kicking around that you've hidden away, hoping that you could work on it in private, where no one is going to see how awful it really was in the stage that you had it in. You've all got those. I know you do. So post one of those and make that your challenge. Say, for this week, I am going to turn this painting, whatever that may be, into a masterpiece. And hopefully by me just sitting here and playing with this and working with this, I'll be able to walk you through the process so that you don't feel abandoned. But at the same time, you also feel very safe within the confines of your own homes or studios or wherever you are. And you feel very safe knowing that no one's judging you, but you have the energy of this beautiful group to support you. So post the goods, post the bads, post them all. Like I said, I'm not embarrassed to show you guys that my paintings go through stages too. And it's always really comical to me when I've done a painting like this where it's just been layers and layers and layers, and somebody says to me, well, how did you get that look? And I can't tell you because I have no clue. It's been so many layers that it has paid off, obviously, because it looks cool or whatever. But the reality is, like, it would be impossible for me to be able to tell how I did something. Okay. So now I think I need to put some of my drips back in. I like drips in layers. What that means is that I like to have drips, and then later on I cover up a lot of them, and then when a little bit can show through, I love the look of that. So it's almost like the drips are controlled to a certain degree. I don't think I have enough paint in here. I've got lots of water and no paint. That's the thing about working on large paintings, is you can't be stingy with your art supplies at all. And because everything is such limited access right now, where you order something and it takes a long time to get your supplies right now, it's becoming more and more I'm becoming more and more stingy with my art supplies, for sure. So I always do my drips with a very watery paint, and I build it up and build it up, let it do some heavy dripping, and then I add a bit of water. So there we go. There. So that'll look much better when it's dry, because I can paint over that. But I think also these could use some drips. I don't think I necessarily want to keep this dark up here, but for now I'll paint it in dark first, and then I can always change it. I think it's going to help me with the composition. It's also going to help me to bring some of that gray down these sides. I'm going to try to be heavier with my edges because I don't want my main image to be too full of drips. It's good, but it's too watery, so I can just tell from my consistency that those are going to end up being very, very watery. So I'll go back in and I'll add some paint. It's all about what they're like when they're dry. It has very little to do with what they look like when they're wet, because when they're wet, they always look a certain way, wet, and then when they're dry, they can look pretty translucent. So, and while things are wet, there's not a whole lot I can do. So maybe now is a good time to start tackling some of this staining. So what I was talking about earlier is that I thought I might try to bring a little something into the sky area. So I do have a lot of water here, but I'm just going to warm up this painting with some white. So what has actually happened is that the image that I chose was blurry. First of all, I just took it from the inside of my car as we were driving. So it's blurry, and it's also, because it's out of focus, and it's also not very super high contrast. So I'm going to try and fix that a little just by bringing in the whites where I want the whites. So I'm not entirely sure about the composition. I am playing with it. I'm kind of liking the shape of a barn or a house or whatever. And the reason I think is because, like, this is kind of their house, their playground, right? So I'm just going to play with that idea. And see where that takes me. So it's all about experimenting. And it doesn't have to look super realistic or anything, because the image, this is one of my, I'm going to find this hard to say the words, but what I'm always striving for in a mixed media painting is to blur the lines between reality and the painting. So sometimes it's easy to make it look more effortless than other times, and then there are other paintings where, like the one I did on Friday in our class, that one where I had the standalone image of Sebastian's first day of school and the geese. I wasn't trying to blur those lines at all. They were quite obvious where those lines were and what those lines were. So this one, I think I'm going to try to wrap around the idea that There we go. That the painting sort of evolves into a photo. Does that make sense? Not even, yeah, evolves, turns into transitions. That's a better word. So it's there's nothing that bugs me more than, I know you're all going to say this to me, but there's nothing that bugs me more is when somebody will see a really well done mixed media painting. And I've heard this in galleries a million times, even if it's not my own work. But I've seen work that's like really, really super well done. And you could tell that that mixed media artist is just like spot on. And then somebody will say, oh, but that's just a photo. And I have to tell you, because you guys have been working with collage now for a little bit, right? Or at least giving it a try. It's not as easy to incorporate your images as just that, right? Oh, it's just a photo. So, and then, I don't know, is it my place then to educate that person but who's saying that? But the reality is, there we go. The reality is it's not easy. And to make something look as wonderful and as mixed media as it can takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of experience or a lot of skill set. And that's where your practice makes perfect. If something doesn't work, then you tried it. If something does work, remember how you did it, because that's going to be very valuable to you as you develop your own skill set for working with imagery. So how you choose to incorporate your imagery is completely up to you, but you do have to develop that skill set that works for you. There. So it's going to take a bit of shading, but what I'm really happy about, and I know you can't see this from far away, is that the image is becoming much more, it's becoming larger, and it's becoming much more of a significant piece in here. I'm going to bring in a bit more white. How are we doing for time here? So 10 more minutes, we're going to be done. But what I want you guys to do is make sure you post. Don't be embarrassed. Make sure you post your before pictures, okay? So before pictures are the theme of the week, and making them awesome is actually a better way to theme the week. Is that we're going to take those paintings that we don't like, that we're embarrassed by, and if you're brave enough to go ahead and throw that into the chat even before fixing it, please do. I will post the before of this one as well so that you can see how this is evolving. And it is evolving. It's going to take some time, but I'm already much happier, like I said, with knowing that there's progress happening and that I can see potential. So if you don't have the experience yet to see potential, then like I said, then you're really stuck with where to go next. If you're willing to sacrifice a few things, then go ahead and cover it in one color of paint, acrylic, chalk paint, doesn't matter. Let it dry a little bit and then run it under the tap and baby wipe it and try and get rid of some of those things. There. Some of my paper, you can't see this, but some of my paper is becoming really soggy. And so that's why I always encourage people to work on 2 or 3 paintings at one time, because paintings do hit this point where they just become a little waterlogged. And especially if you use as much collage as I do, and it doesn't really look all that great. So I don't know if I'm still in the frame, but I'll keep talking anyway. So yeah, that's your challenge for this week, is to post something. And for those of you who haven't been painting in a long time, or you have never painted, I know we've got some people following that don't paint at all, then maybe show us something that that you were working on. So if you did have something else, maybe you're working in a different medium or something like that, maybe it's time now to pull that out and to keep working on something else. I don't know where this composition's going, but it's definitely interesting. I feel like sometimes I have like a little muse sitting on my shoulder telling me, no, don't do that, do that. So at times when I get quiet, it's I'm not even thinking, it's like I'm trying to listen. There we go. Much better. So these dark things in here are doing nothing for me. So I'm toning them out a little bit. But at the same time, I don't want to get rid of it because I consider all layers good layers, right? So if anybody's wondering where the shape of this circle came from, because I will get that question, I held a garbage can up earlier and I just kind of traced it where I thought was sort of the middle, so it's just giving me a rough shape. I can't just eyeball half circles. There we go. Yeah, much better. Much better. Awesome. Okay, so you guys remember, we're gonna wrap this up for today, and I won't do any more painting on this one because I want you to be able to follow along. But that's a lot of paint for today. It is very soggy, so like I said, I do have to leave it. And so I'm not going to do any more painting either. But what I will do is I'll just soften some of this paint before it dries with my baby wipes. And the purpose for that, as I mentioned before, is that once the paint is cured, it's hard to get back to the to that layer. Then the other thing that I will have to do before too long is, if I want to keep some of my lines somewhat straight, and the reason for that is because if I stand back on a big painting and I have some horizontal lines or some vertical lines that are really having a hard time because of what I've done, like in terms of if I've created a crooked horizon or whatever, it's never really going to sit all that well with me or with anybody. So I will have to take out my T-square, and I'll use my pencil and I'll get back in and I'll make some of my lines a bit straighter. So all I'm going to do is, like I said, let this dry for a few more minutes, soften it with some baby wipes, and then shore up some of my lines and go from there. So I think that's it for today. So post, right? Everybody post a picture of something that you abandoned or you were too embarrassed to show somebody. We all know that you can pull it off and you can finish it up. So show me your ugly paintings. I want to see something that you gave up on because you didn't think it had any potential. Okay? So that's it for today, guys. I will get back in the frame so I can say bye. We'll see you tomorrow. And so, yeah, post. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.